what does it mean to be human then? And I think that humans have not had a definite answer to that ever in our existence. And so what I particularly love about it is that people find themselves at, well, is there possibly something that we can't explain about being in a physical body? And I think embodied intelligence is something that's of increasing interest to me.
There's a fear that Gen AI will hollow out the very skills it was supposed to augment. If AI writes our emails, we stop learning to communicate. Is this thought or feeling legitimate?
Open social media use or undisciplined feeds, and you don't know what you're going to get when you open up a feed. It's wild card. It's like a slot machine at a casino for your mental health. If you're spending more than 80% of your time in digital spaces, then your workplace is a digital workplace. This is a digital culture. Your culture is a digital culture because most people are having digitally mediated experiences.
You are watching 101 Talks with Sachin Menon. Breaking down complex ideas into simple conversations.
We are living in a world where you wake up, you check your phone, and before your day even begins, your mood is already influenced by people you have never met. And now add AI into this, a system that not only understands you, but can influence what you see, what you think, and even what you feel. And here's the real question. Are we building technology that serves humans, or are we slowly training humans to serve technology? Today's conversation is not about AI tools. It's about something deeper: digital well-being, human behavior, and the future of how we stay human. And I couldn't think of a better person to explore this with. She's a social scientist, TEDx speaker, and one of the early voices helping us understand how social media shapes our mental health. Recognized as Canada's top 100 most powerful women, Dr. Bailey, really great to have you here.
I'm glad to be here and to talk about this some more. Thank you.
I want to start here. You have been studying human behavior, social media, and digital well-being long before it became mainstream. But then you took this research to a global stage, advising UN, the NFL, and the governments around the world. Walk us through that journey, where it all started.
Yeah, for sure. The thing is, digital well-being wasn't really called that as a field 20 years ago, even though there were people who were concerned with how technology affects our lives and how we can use technology for good. It's not to say that those researchers didn't exist a long time ago. We just are now collected in a much more intentional way, especially because of things like social media, of course, and AI and the internet and all of these things. So I started because I worked in a higher ed institution, a university now called Toronto Metropolitan University. And I was also doing my undergrad there, and I studied media production, which originally was TV. But this was at the time when social media was coming out, becoming popular. And at that time, Instagram was kind of just getting big, and we had Facebook and Twitter that were already popular. And I was more interested in understanding this world than I was in the world of television. And once I got into the social media marketing world, I realized, oh, okay, so marketers have really figured this out. They figured out how to sell you things on Facebook and Twitter. But these are really communal tools. How can we use these same tools in education to connect students to their school, to their learning, to each other in meaningful ways? And so myself and a collaborator at the time, we had really pioneered what was then digital student engagement. And it really wasn't happening all over the world because these tools were so new. And what we meant by that was, can we use social media to do that, create digital community instead of just selling? And so we pioneered some programs like by students for students, some new ways of almost like internally marketing what the school could offer students, but to the students for free. So it's like, did you know that you have student leadership department or housing, or here's what we're running, and keeping them abreast of what was going on in their community. And then this was over 10 years ago now, but then some articles started coming out about how Facebook and Twitter may affect teen depression. That's what we're talking about then. And it was really not that many. Like it was not a lot. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, well, if we're going to be asking a whole lot of young people to come be on social media with us, it's actually our responsibility to make sure that they can do it safely. In fact, we literally partnered with the health and wellness department at the university. So we were very much involved in mental health, and we were also the tech social media people. So it was kind of like just this wonderful, I guess, kismet situation where we had partnered. And unlike social media marketers who were meant for selling things, we worked with a health and wellness department. So that's what got me into looking into that, which snowballed into the TED Talk, which you saw. And that's how you found me about social media's impact on mental health. That all snowballed. My master's research was about this. And then very quickly, I realized that this stuff went beyond social media to other forms of technology, that this tech was quite invasive. I would even find myself talking about how the phone and the mobile experience in and of itself had impacts on mental health. And then I also found myself going beyond mental health and talking about how social media affected society and democracies and governments and how that also affected your health and well-being. And so then I realized that what we were really talking about was digital well-being and how technology can or cannot be used in ways that serve our human flourishing or do not. And so that really is these days focused a lot on AI for me.
Wow. See, what I see is many people understand it academically, but very few step forward and say this needs to be talked about now. So you are one among them. So you founded Skills Camp back in 2016. What was the gap you saw that nobody else was filling?
Yeah, so Skills Camp is a little bit different. I own a nonprofit called Center for Digital Wellbeing, which used to be Safe Social. But Skills Camp is my original business, and it is a learning studio that specializes in leadership development and soft skills training. And so when I started that 10 years ago, it was actually born out of the same context, really. Because I mentioned that I worked in higher ed and I worked in student affairs, which is sort of everything outside the classroom that supports student success. And I also mentioned that that meant we worked with departments like health and wellness, and that meant teaching students resilience and empathy and mental health strategies. And we also worked with the Career Center, which meant teaching them personal branding or really just personal storytelling and how to find your strengths and, you know, time management and all of these skills that we now call sort of soft skills, or I call sort of personal and interpersonal leadership skills. I just saw that the students who used the services, including myself, were much more successful. But the reality was that most didn't use them, even though they were freely available. And then we would have the employers who were hiring our students in internships and whatnot. They would come to us and say, yeah, we want to hire students, but these are the skills they're missing. They're missing the ability to work well with others or problem solving or communication skills. And so I there thinking, so this is what everybody's asking for in the world of work. And these are definitely the skills that are making people successful, but they're not being taught in the classroom. And so then I just felt that we were the perfect person to teach them because we already were. And they went well beyond students. Adults needed older adults needed these, and employees, and then leaders. And leadership became a specialization for me, in part because they're a high influence group. We are people who, if a leader controls a very big portion of your engagement in work, which for most of us is half of our waking life. And if they are skilled and healed and grounded, they will affect hundreds in very positive ways, role modeling the very
Very true.
skills that I'm talking about. So that's how that got started.
Very true. On a lighter note, and what did people say when you told them soft skills were going to be the defining advantage of the future? Were they surprised?
Yes, it's true. I've been saying that for a very long time. And I think that with AI now, people are starting to see it a little bit differently and hear me a little bit differently. But when I said it back then, it made sense to people. Like when I would describe, communication skills, teamwork, and just no one's been taught how to do it, but you actually can teach how to do this. It made sense to them intuitively because everyone knows this. Everyone's like, yes, that's true. My favorite teammates have these skills. My best employees have these skills. The most effective leaders have these skills. Why is no one teaching them? But what I found earlier on was that because it was harder earlier to connect it to the bottom line, even if HR folks or leaders really knew the value, they would sometimes have a harder time justifying it internally. And they would have a tougher time saying, we could do this training on how to use Excel, which will very much yield an outcome or it won't. And they would have a tougher time justifying why we need to do emotional intelligence training or why the relational work between our people, as in maybe team building that you might call it, was really, really important for the bottom line and for performance of everyone. I find that that has changed slightly over the years in that it takes maybe less justification these days. Maybe there's a collective consciousness raising about how, especially in the world of mental health, as you can imagine, and generationally it changes in that younger generations have more language around their experience when it comes to health and well-being. They have less stigma about saying it out loud, and therefore they have higher expectations of systems, adults, workplaces, and whatnot with respect to that. And as do I, and I support them in those expectations. So that's happening alongside things like the global pandemic that really forced people into conversations about mental health. So all of this has been brewing over the last 5 years. And I feel like that has
Oh,
created a collective language raising around health and well-being.
yeah, that's been a fantastic journey. All right, Dr. Bailey, let's get into something uncomfortable. We all know social media affects us, yeah, but we don't really admit how deeply. Why do you think people avoid acknowledging the impact it has on their mental health?
First off, I think people do not acknowledge the impact it has on their mental health because they don't know. And I still find myself 10 years later telling people about just that. Hey, did you know that social media, one, can affect your mental health? It can be bad, it can be good. And here's how, and here's what to look out for. And sometimes I go back and forth between, motivated and disappointed that I still have to share that conversation so widely, but I do because there's new users and the world around us has changed. And so that's reason number one. People don't actually know. They think like, oh, this is harmless. I'm just taking a break from work. I'm just scrolling through Instagram. Oh, the world is falling apart. And they may not connect that an hour later, they're thinking to themselves, gosh, why am I so exhausted? Why do I feel pessimistic and not very hopeful about the future? And they may not have connected that that is very much a side effect of open social media use or undisciplined feeds. And you don't know what you're going to get when you open up a feed. It's wild card. It's like a slot machine at a casino for your mental health, unless you are extremely, extremely diligent about two things: designing your experience in the tech. So, who you follow. You'll see young people, especially on TikTok, do things like commenting for the algorithm. And really, what they're trying to do is just create a better experience for themselves. And the second, probably more important thing is when you are self aware enough to know that you are already stressed or already tired, angry, you should not be using in that moment because if social media will amplify whatever you are experiencing offline. And so that's one that people don't know. And then the second, there's another reason why people don't want to confront that social media is hurting them. One is that they might be addicted. They themselves might have not realized how much of a dependency they have on even just like mental busyness, just like being bored in a line or commuting and using this as a way to just, distract themselves. And so they, again, may not have connected that even that has an effect on your mental health. And sometimes it's a pride or ego thing, depending on who you're talking to. Like, oh, all these people I don't know, they don't affect me, and that doesn't affect my life. When in fact it does. It's kind of like I see it like if a diet is a combination, if our sort of food diet is what we put into our mouth to nourish our body, this is like our mental diet. Like, what are we putting into our brain, and does it or does it not nourish our being?
The social media will amplify our thoughts, our moods, if we are angry or we are stressed. So we
Mhm.
have to avoid social media during those times.
Yes, that would be the most useful. That would actually be a really useful strategy for everyone. And that's what came out of my master's research, was that it actually was the greatest indicator and moderator of whether or not someone had a good time on social media was how they felt about themselves offline at time of use. And that meant, if you were already feeling bad or tired or unmotivated or depressed or all of these things, that you would see a post and you would think like, the world, I knew it. Just, the world is just horrible. This person's so frustrating. Why do they keep posting like this? And it would accentuate what was going on offline. Whereas if you were already feeling good about yourself and motivated and like you had taken steps towards your goals that day, you would see the same post and you would say, well, they're trying their best, or wow, I feel really bad for that person. Or well, you might see someone who has something that you would like for yourself and you think, oh, that's motivating. I'm going to add that to my goals and my vision board. And that's really, it was so not only do different people view content differently, but you will view it differently based on how you're feeling.
Dr. Billy, coming to your TED Talk on digital well-being, it has been viewed 53 lakhs or 5.3 million times
Mm.
by people. In your TEDx talk, you said something powerful. Social media isn't just a tool anymore. It is a digital layer of life. Can you elaborate on this digital layer of life?
Yes, I mean, I had 2 TED Talks. So one was about social media mental health, and one was about the soft skills or the skills needed in the future of work. And both were talked about a layer of digital understanding. What I mean by that now is that when I work with people in their workplaces, especially, most people in knowledge work are spending over 80% of their time in digital spaces. Not just social media, actually, although they often do that on their break and on lunch and in the
Yeah.
bathroom. But they're even in digital spaces on email or on Slack or Teams chats or in a Zoom call or something like that. And so I say to them, are you spending more than 80% of your time in those spaces? And they say yes. Almost all of them say yes. So I say, if you're spending more than 80% of your time in digital spaces, then your workplace is a digital workplace. You are experiencing your colleagues, your customers and clients, your culture and values digitally mediated. And so when I go to workplaces, I see this is a digital culture. Your culture is a digital culture because most people are having digitally mediated experiences. So have you thought about it? These values that are really important to you, this mission, this vision, have you thought through how it is communicated digitally? Have you chosen tools or software that meets your values because you're the buyer here and you can ask for that? And I always use this example called, that came up was a real example. It was called, what's the purpose of the cake? And I had
What is the purpose of the cake?
yes, and I had someone come to me in one of these digital these hybrid workshops, and we were talking about how to do this best. And they said, I just really miss being in person with people because, meet together and we would like celebrate, for example, we would celebrate people's birthdays and we would always bring in a cake. And so I said to them, like, if we were translating that over to digital culture, which is your culture, what was the purpose of the cake? And so they said, no, I said, really, deconstruct it. What was the purpose of the cake in celebrating someone's birthday? And, they would say things that we would say. It was to honor them, to recognize someone, to make them feel special, and to gather the team together for a reason that didn't have to do with work. And everyone
Yes.
likes food. And so I said, okay, well, if we were to translate that motivation over to the digital world, what would be a birthday celebration that, one, we should still do birthday celebrations, and two, what would be the way that we could recognize them, make them feel special, gather the team for a reason that didn't have to do with the work we were doing. And even if you just stopped there, you may arrive at like one thing I do at offline and online birthdays is, everyone goes around and says one of their favorite things about the birthday person or something that they really like or respect. And they're all shy, but then they feel so good about themselves. And everyone else feels good because you've made someone feel good. And you've gathered together
Okay.
for a reason that wasn't the work. And so when you're translating over to digital cultures and that layer that you spoke about, it's really, I think, wise for people to lead with their values first and their mission first.
I love that part. What is the purpose of the cake? I'll remember it.
Yes, exactly.
Dr. Bivli, you spoke about highlight reel effect,
Mm.
where we compare our behind the scene to everyone else's best moments. Do you think a comparison has now become almost subconscious? Like people don't even realize it's happening anymore?
I believe that social comparison is a natural state of being human. In fact, my master's work, if anyone is interested in this, the theoretical lens was social comparison theory. And the idea there
Okay.
over in sociology is just that humans compare themselves as a means of understanding our own identity. And that could be very simple, as much as like, I know that I'm a tall person because I look around and most people are shorter. Therefore, that informs my identity as a tall person. comparison. This happened long before social media, social comparison. And so under that idea, yes, we are still comparing ourselves the theory would suggest, even at a subconscious level all the time. The difference with social media and what I mentioned in the TED Talk is that it's actually a faulty comparison. If I was in research and I said, I'm going to compare hey, this farmer, you get to give me your best apples. Yep, all the best ones that you ever had. And this farmer, you get to give me whatever is on that tree. And no, it can't be your best. It's just whatever's there. And then you would say, well, that's not a fair comparison. Everyone would say that. They'd be like, that's not fair. You got to choose your best. And so we do this to ourselves. We look at other people's content, which now half is created or edited by AI, and we say, oh, like subconsciously, it's like, I like that. And so someone subconsciously is saying, I like that. I want that. I'm going to go get that. And someone is subconsciously saying, I like that. Why don't I have that? And so yes, I do think it's happening widely all the time, on and offline, punctuated on social media. But here's something promising, and I hope that people will find this motivating as they listen. In my research, I also looked at I mentioned comparison theory, but you can make an upward comparison where you deem someone better, a neutral comparison where you deem them sort of on the same playing field, and then a negative comparison where you deem them below you for whatever reason. And there were actually people making upward comparisons, as in for some reason you view whatever they have as better than you, and they were feeling bad about themselves. That would have a decline in mental health. But there were also a group of people where they would make that upward comparison and it did not affect their mental health negatively. It either was neutral or affected them positively. And the reason why was because of what I just mentioned. They would say, like, look at a travel influencer and say, ooh, wow, that's really beautiful. I'm going to go there. I'm going to add that to my vision board. I didn't even know that was there. Or for me, I would see a fashion influencer and I would say, like, that's good. I would never put that outfit together. Like, thank you for showing me how to do that. I'm going to go do that tomorrow. And so it would actually motivate them in a way. And so that was very much a reflection of what was going on offline.
True, true. So it is like taking the thread from the Apple example, like we compare our regular life with someone else's best life. Like say they will be capturing the best moments in the social media and that's what the Apple example you meant, right?
Yes, exactly. So I'm comparing my whole apple orchard to someone else's best apples, and that is not a fair comparison. Would be like they would be looking at you and saying parts of your life they'd wish for themselves. And once you really start, I've had the privilege of being able to travel around the world, and just through my nature of work is a weird kind of work, and I get to go meet a lot of people, a lot of industries, a lot of companies, I mean, a lot of ages, races, all over the place, and I get to get deep with them quickly when you start talking about topics like communication, stress, things that really affect people, tensions in leadership, inclusion. So when you get there and you get very quickly, what I've learned is that everyone shares more similarities than they do differences. Most people want the same things. You would not think that after a social media scroll, though. You really would not think that after watching the news for a day. But actually, most people are good, and they are maybe sometimes unskilled. But if you work with that, then you're saying, the comparison, for instance, it's very natural state to look at to look and make upward comparisons, but others are doing that to your life too, and that can be hard to recognize until you're in a communal situation talking openly about it.
And Dr. Billy, another one that really stood out to me was social currency, where our self-worth gets tied to likes, comments, and engagement. Do you think GenAI and algorithm feeds are amplifying this?
Yes. So social currency, like every other currency, is something we use to attribute value, like a dollar or, a euro or something like this. And in social media, we have created a currency that used to be, likes, comments, shares when I gave the TED Talk, but more accurately today, it would be when you spend 5 seconds extra on a video or privately share something in a DM to your friend. Or, let's say you watch a video because you hate it and you're like, I can't believe this. I can't believe someone would say this on social media. And you watch it and you send it to your friend and you say, oh my gosh, this is terrible. and you share it on WhatsApp, well, guess what? I mean, the algorithm in that currency, they have still gained currency. Even if you spent your attention on it because you dislike it and you shared it because you dislike it, that is actually still registering currency, which is attention. The currency is your attention, and you have spent your attention on it and you have amplified it by way of making it part of other people's attention spend. So, yes, when you enter things like Gen AI and, the algorithms tuning into this is very much trying very hard to earn your attention. And it has become incredibly good at earning that attention. So how you spend your attention, which is your currency, is incredibly important. And I actually think really empowering and powerful. But I am a grounded optimist. And so I think like when I look offline, I have seen movements where people said, I'm not going to spend my dollars on X anymore, or I am going to spend my dollars on X. And it made changes and it made movements in the economy. So let's go over to the economy of attention. If you have a bunch of young people saying, I'm not down for this anymore. I'm going to block this user. I'm going to not give it any more of my attention. I'm not going to share this. That will be a registered currency. The platforms will devalue it. And, you can argue about the value of, the ethics of that, but that is what the economy of attention is. And in that economy, social currency is your attentions.
Yeah. And then there's FOMO and online harassment. Do you think we have normalized stress to a point where people don't even label it as a stress anymore?
My biggest concern in the area of online gosh, I shouldn't say biggest. I have a lot of concerns there. But there are very serious concerns in the world of online harassment, like doxing and stalking, and now using AI to sexualize images of people without their consent and to spread it around a high school, or everything you've seen related to what's the exploitation of young children and women. That is like the worst part of the world and internet, if you ask me. But yes, like that's the worst part. However, for your listeners, the part of online harassment that they probably experience most often is like seeing mean comments and being left out of a group chat and these little things that happen, but they happen every day, all day. And that's the stuff that I don't think people realize does weigh on them. It becomes normalized, and it's not normal. Do not let the comments on a celebrity's Instagram photo fool you. That is not normal social behavior. We would not treat each other that way offline. And if I in fact met with those people in person, they would never say that. And what's really is an expression of, to me, is an expression of offline frustration with their life. And I almost don't even blame them, because I can probably think of a million systemic reasons why their life is the way that it is for most people, but they don't realize that. So in the world of online harassment, where I would just want all listeners to be aware of is that when you're consuming that stuff, one, it's not normal. Two, hold yourself to the standard that you believe to be good, moral, and true offline, regardless of what other people are doing. Do not let them drag you down to their standard. And just be aware, like when you see this stuff, remember that that's part of controlling your digital feed. Don't let it force you into pessimism.
So let's shift gears. This is where I think the conversation gets a little interesting, because now we are entering a world where it's not just social media affecting behavior, it's AI shaping cognition. If AI can write, think, suggest, decide, what happens to human skills? What becomes more valuable?
I get asked this question a lot right now, especially because I started a human skills company before I was in digital well-being. So it's just a weird combination that not many people have in the world.
Oh.
So I'm glad for it now, because there are a few things I think AI will not be able to do better. And there are some things that humans need to investigate for themselves. So first off, in the immediate future, that I think most of us would agree in AI ethics and beyond, just as a regular user listener, you're going to feel that this is true. I use AI. I'm AI assisted in most things. What I do not outsource to AI is accountability. By the way, I say this to my own team as well. I say, can use AI. In fact, I encourage it, because I believe that there's something that comes out of human plus AI that can be better than either alone, but you are not allowed to outsource accountability and judgment. Therefore, what the output is wholly on you. The decisions made are wholly on you. The text that goes out, wherever it goes, the image created, the plan that is acted on is wholly on you. And That also means judgment for our values. Our values as an organization, language we would not use, ways I would not write. That is also on you as part of the judgment layer. That involves a level of critical thinking and contextual awareness. Now, where I think AI is not as good as humans yet is contextual awareness, because it changes so quickly and it is in the minutia of human connectedness, and also relationality. AI can support human relationships. I'm working on a project in that realm right now and actually make them stronger, but it is not going to hold to the relationship for the human. And that
Okay.
relational
Okay.
connection is very important. So what makes human relationships great? A lot of the skills we talked about already, like emotional intelligence and that sort of connectedness. Now, my favorite thing in this realm, and this part is maybe getting a little far out there for some, but
Sure,
not
sure.
for most. And this is this. What I love about studying in the intelligence world and the artificial extension of that intelligence is that we will inevitably end up at what does it mean to be human then? And I love it because it connects so many fields. It's very transdisciplinary. It's like it is used to be tech, but it's not. It's sociology, it's anthropology, it's history, it's all these things coming together and saying, what does it mean to be human then? And I think that humans have not had a definite answer to that ever in our existence. And so, what I particularly love about it is that people find themselves at, well, is there possibly something that we can't explain about being in a physical body? And I think embodied intelligence is something that's of increasing interest to me. I mean, it's just like it was before, but for obvious reasons, it's of increasing interest. For instance, where I might compare it for you is like, we're getting kind of deep here, y'all. I hope you can follow me here.
Please, please. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, let's say you're looking at a species of other animal or even another mammal. Let's say like whales or elephants. The way that they communicate with each other is they know without things said that there is something of their species nearby, and something of their species that is right in front of them and that needs care, for instance. They also will care for other species. That's not what I'm saying here, but they do know their own species and they know it without words said. So that makes me think, as mammals ourselves, is there possibly a way of knowing each other that we have not fully put words to yet because science has not helped us understand it yet? And that is, to me, the goal of science, to help us better understand the human condition, but it hasn't yet. Embodied intelligence is real. We know that it's true. We know that our body will react to things before we have even thought about it. I'm interested in that, and I think that others should be too, because AI will not have an organic body. Even if it was put into us as a chip, that's of interest. It probably will happen, but it will not be embodied in the same way.
That's a good food for the thought.
Well, I mean, if anyone listening is wondering what they should study in the future, I'm interested in
Yeah,
embodied intelligence.
good. Speaking on the same lines, like AI, earlier we optimized for efficiency. Now we might need to optimize for judgment, awareness, and emotional intelligence. There's a
Yeah, judgment, critical thinking, contextual awareness, relationality, accountability. Yep, these things.
These are the things what we will be optimizing ourselves for. There's a fear that Gen AI will hollow out the very skills it was supposed to augment. If AI writes our emails, we stop learning to communicate. Is this thought or feeling legitimate? Is this fear legitimate?
Yes, it is a legitimate fear. If someone fears it, it's legitimate. And
Mm.
that doesn't mean that it's grounded in likelihood or possibility, but if they're experiencing the fear, it's a legitimate fear. And for people to say, for people to say, I'm worried that AI will not augment, but actually will replace a skill set is a concern of mine as well. I mean, the reason why I can use GenAI so effectively is because I had a judgment built up ahead of time. So, for instance, I already knew how to communicate well. I already knew my voice. I already knew what's important to me and the language that I would not use. And I know what makes a good, let's say, I don't know, report or like a learning design or leadership development experience. I already knew that. So for me to be able to judge AI's output and to actually use it better, I had judgment built up ahead of time. Where I am concerned is that we are actually going to have to rethink how we train people, how we educate them, and what we expect them to do when they first come and join our communities and organizations. Because It used to be that early days in an organization, you would do sort of like you would put your time in and you would learn that basic stuff, thus building the muscle of judgment so that when you would eventually go make decisions or, read something, you could see, is it good or is it bad or is it what we want in the world? That's judgment as well, moral judgment. So I'm concerned for young folks about like how do we build this judgment layer so that no matter what the tool is, you are able to use it well. I think that that changes onboarding in organizations. I think that even in my own organization, if I'm going to put that hat on right now live, I haven't thought through this as much before, but like in my own organization, I will make AI available to everyone with ethical understanding, tech literacy, and human readiness training. But I would say to them, like, let's be clear on what our values are and our expectations of what is considered excellent and how we govern ourselves with clients. All of that is preceded. Therefore, you can only use the tool within that framework. So I'm kind of training judgment in a way. I'm training like what is okay and not okay if you work with me at Skills Camp. That way, I don't care what tool you use. Go figure it out, be free, but use it within that framework. So I guess if I'm thinking that out loud, I am concerned about skill building and that it needs to change. I'm concerned that the traditional systems of government and academia will not be able to keep up with this. They're just not right now. And I'm here and ready to help, and I need others to help me too.
Yes. And see, taking from what you're saying, specifically for younger generation who are growing up with both social media and AI, do you think they are developing differently than we did?
Generation that has grown up with social media and now AI is absolutely growing up differently than we did. And it is absolutely creating different ways of relating to other humans, of consuming information, of producing information, of working out ideas and cognition, of sense of self, of literally every part of maybe human existence, except for that our take that back. Our physical bodies are being affected as well because of the mobile phone use, screen use, like the carpal tunnel. So yes, it has affected every single part of our lives and being, even if they have decided to abstain and they're not allowed a phone and they're not allowed social media. Even that is a choice in certain parts of the world that will affect their decisions and way to socialize with others. It will affect whether or not you recognize what's on the news because it's probably pulled from social media these days. So yes, it has very much affected them. I do not think that adults protected children enough in this growth of these technologies. Even in simple ways, we have been fighting for child rights in the social media space for as long as it's been around, which is 20 years now. But no, adults have absolutely not protected children, and I feel for them, and I don't think that it's their fault.
Yeah, since it's growing so rapidly, parents don't know where to protect, where to control, right? So it's new for them also. They're also learning with the wave.
Yes, I have the most empathy for parents because depending where you are in the world, you are also likely working more than any generation before you. You are also experiencing perhaps a victim of social media and oversaturation of a world that is, more connected and but not connecting. And you're probably tired too. There's volatile uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. You're seeing trauma at a level that humans have never seen it before, and our brains are not built to process. That's not even yours. But if you're even remotely empathetic person, of course you're going to be feeling what you see after a social media scroll. And so I have the most empathy for parents because this floodgates were open, but no one had any literacy. And for a very long time, people didn't know what the risks of using were. It wasn't where I get a little bit frustrated is that it wasn't your responsibility. If you're listening right now, it shouldn't have been your responsibility. It should have been the responsibility of governments and the business that was now suddenly having a lot of power and influence. We theoretically, at least where I live in Canada and as well I'm in the US right now, but in New York City. But so in Canada, the theory is, in that kind of democracy that you vote for people that are supposed to represent you and that the government is actually in part supposed to protect the people, public service, serve the public in the face of things like business. So I think the contract was broken and people are feeling that. There's a mass distrust of public institutions right now, and they were supposed to protect kids. And that is a very long way of saying that I have the most empathy for parents. However, I'm a parent now too. And we can't always rely on others. We can't rely on the government to make sure that our kid doesn't get hit by a car when they're riding their bike on the street. And sometimes part of it is our responsibility, and that sucks. It's a hard part of parenting. I agree.
True, true. Very emotional thought. Yeah. Because it's not a tech shift, it is a human evolution moment, right? What we
I
are seeing
agree.
now is not a tech shift.
Very many human evolution moments happened because of new technologies, and they were not all digital.
Yeah. And Dr. Bailey, I want to touch upon the leadership part of it. Yeah. Because leaders today are not just managing teams, they are managing humans plus technology plus behavior. We see attention is fragmented. AI is accelerating decisions, like you mentioned, and
Mm.
people are mentally overloaded, right? So, what does responsible leadership look like in this world?
This is such a great question. First off, I believe everyone can be a great leader. That is my first paradigm. Everyone listening here can be a great leader. And for me, leadership starts at leadership of self. Leadership of self, then others, teams, organizations, and communities, which leads to leadership of society. And what makes historically, and therefore also like ancient future, as my husband says, the ancient future of ourselves is I believe great leaders are relational, first off. I believe that leadership is emergent from relationships between people. It is not simply a state because you have a title. And that's what I also mean by leadership of self and your relationship with yourself. I believe that the best leaders in history are guided towards collective flourishing. The greatest leaders we talk about want what's best for all and not just for them and their in group. They see this as a craft that can be built for the rest of your days on this planet. And maybe afterwards, if you leave stories and intellectual property. And, my leadership will live on through my kids, through the people that I interact with, through those that I teach. And that craft can be built up and skilled. Like there may be a skill that I need today that I didn't need 10 years ago to be an effective leader of people relationally collected towards flourishing. So those are some things to start with. That precedes an open-mindedness, curiosity towards learning, a belief that we all have value. My husband is a big researcher in this area, and he talks about the light triad of traits and calls it, just that light triad is, I think, something around
Like triad.
Kantianism. Yeah, light triad. His name is Hamza Khan. Yeah. So that's my beliefs about the future of leadership.
Because, earlier leadership
Yeah.
was about performance, but now it should also be about protecting well being.
One might argue that protecting well being is protecting performance because you cannot perform, and not by perform, I mean holistic performance. I mean, like, are we all meeting our collective goals that we have set? In meeting those, that is performance. Let's just use that for now. Then you can't do that to the best of your ability if you are not well. If you're not financially well, you then are concerned about things like eating and a roof over your head. And that is going to pull your everything, cognition, stress, mental, all of it away from what you are collectively doing in the world of work, let's say. So, yeah, I would say in order to perform, which may be a leader's responsibility, that everyone is collectively performing and meeting our collective goals, that you are going to have to consider things in the future and today that you didn't have to and that you got away with not considering 50 years ago. Depending on your, obviously we're in different parts of the world and there are different paradigms of work and there are different social paradigms that affect work, like even things like, gender relations or the way the government is structured and in social supports. Like all of this affects how leaders and what they had to care for at various times of history.
One point I want to touch upon is you are named one of Canada's top 100 powerful women. What
Mm.
does that power mean to you?
Well, I also believe everyone has power within them. There's a couple things I think about. When I won that award, I was actually a Rising Leader award. And so I respect the fact that they recognized that same ethos, that they weren't just saying, like, oh, do you have a lot of money? Or do you have a lot of followers? Do you have a lot of things? Like they were recognizing that power is a different kind of experience. So I respect that to this day. I also believe that everyone has power within them. And power, I guess, If I'm thinking top of my mind definition, it's almost like the ability to exert one's influence. Like to what degree do you have the power to or the power, like, can you influence the world around you in the way that you want it to? And that includes people. So power over what? Power over environment, power over people. I would say maybe power through would be more beneficial for the future, and collective power sharing would be more beneficial. So that's what I think about power these days. And I think that it comes with if you are very effective at it, or have been given resources that automatically bestowed you power, then that does come with responsibility. And what you influence matters, and how you influence, and who you influence, and where you influence. All of this matters. And that requires moral decisions that I hope, as I mentioned earlier, are guided towards collective flourishing.
Collective flourishing. I'll keep that word in mind. Let's zoom out, Dr. Bailey. If you had to look in the next 3-5 years, what concerns you the most? What gives you hope?
I'm worried that there are certain men in the world that have placed their own importance over the importance of others. They've decided that them and their in group matters more than the collective flourishing of children, women, and everyone, actually. I'm worried that they will be able to do more harm before what I really believe is that most people are good, and that the upcoming generations see the world and each other differently. In the next 3 to 5 small time frame, I'm worried that they will have more power before the rest of us reclaim our power collectively and put the world the way that we want it to be, the way most of us want it to be. I'm also worried that under that paradigm, that in the next 3 to 5 years, that traditional governments will not be able to keep up in protecting people against big business, and that's their responsibility. However, I'm optimistic. As much as I say that, I'm optimistic because I see I'm here in New York, and I'm really interested in liking what Zoran Mamdani is doing and approaching public service as a service. And so that's encouraging. I think that will encourage a lot of other kinds of people to get into public service. And when you have other ways of thinking, you get other results. So those are some concerns I have. And with the government if they don't figure out this AI thing soon, people are going to be afraid, and they will gather in fear. And when people gather in fear, we don't have always the best outcomes. If we could gather them in optimism, or maybe think about other ways for people to reach universal basic outcomes, if governments could support that, I actually think AI could move us all towards a more flourishing future, like move us all towards closer to that utopia than we've ever been in a post-work world, but only if we have moral leaders,
Democratic AI. Yeah.
like
We,
moral
we
leaders.
might have to democratize the AI part, right? Should not be with the very few people controlling it.
That's a very interesting thought experiment, actually. I haven't thought about that really deeply, but what could it look like if AI was turned into a public service? Something like this? Is that what you're imagining? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. Yeah. Yeah. That would be worth exploring. Do you see what I'm saying? Someone
Yeah.
well-oriented towards collective flourishing would ask that question. They would not ask, how can I make more money and privatize this for a few people? And that's the question we should ask and explore together. And you asked me what makes me hopeful. And that, or movements like that, make me hopeful because it's a step in the right direction. It is still in a system that is, it props up one person. And so I'm aware of the potential risks of propping up one person, but I'm hopeful because I've seen the way many persons have been inspired by that message. And if you can have a message that inspires many, when people collect in a hopeful way, moved towards collective flourishing, you also have global movements. And that's very hopeful for me.
True. Your points are very valid in the current geopolitical situations.
I think so too. I think most people listening, if we just orient ourselves this way, we would all arrive at similar conclusions.
And Dr. Bailey, for someone listening today
Mhm.
who feels this but doesn't know where to start,
Mm.
what's one small shift they can make immediately on the digital well-being part?
Okay, yes. On digital well-being, I always start with leadership of self. I mean, I don't know everyone's, quote unquote power levels here, or your ability to influence. But one thing I know for sure is that we can influence ourselves, and we can work on the relationship with ourselves. And leadership of self is in the digital well-being space, is thinking through simple things like we talked about, like, how do I spend my attention, and where do I want to give my currency that is my attention, and who do I follow even, and what does stress me out? Because if I don't know what stresses me out, I can't design a feed that helps me be well. And so you can certainly start in an extreme way with your own self-awareness and your own leadership of self and experiences in digital spaces. And also just how you act online. You can control how you act online. And in a relational world like social media, that how you act creates other people's digital spaces.
We come to rapid fire. Fast questions, quick answers, no overthinking.
Geez, I'm not very good at underthinking. I overthink everything.
Take your time, I'll edit it and make it fast. Social media platform you would delete tomorrow if you could.
Facebook.
Facebook, okay. Best piece of feedback you ever received.
One that stands out is start from a place or act as if you already had your goal. As in, whatever your goal is and whoever you are in that goal, who is that person? Act like them now.
One book every leader needs to read right now.
The Big Leap.
The Big Leap. First thing you do every morning before you check your phone.
I don't anymore. The first thing I do is check my phone because my kids are young, 8 months, and what's it called? Their monitor is an application on my phone. So the first thing I do is check their monitor. Talking about
All right, that was sharp. But I want to slow it down for a final thought. If you had to leave people with one idea as they navigate social media, AI, and everything we spoke about today, what's one thing they should stay conscious of so they don't lose themselves in the process?
good people use any tool in good ways. That includes digital tools, and it includes social media, and it includes AI.
You know, the future of work is in good hands when people designing AI systems start asking a social scientist how humans actually work. Has that started happening yet, or are we still mostly letting the engineers figure it out? That's the question to be answered.
No, they have been asking how humans actually work. And that's how I believe that we got to generative AI in the first place. We started designing it after how humans learn, and we are continuing to do that. What I'm asking is, and what I'm pleading for, and I hope that everyone here will ask and demand really, that is to what end? Is to what end? Yes, how humans actually work can make technology serve us better, and we can use those technologies to serve everyone better. So what we're serving is that kind of matters.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bailey, for joining in
Thank you
and
for having
sharing
me.
with us good ideas, good conversation. And hope this shifts somebody's fear of social anxiety and improves their digital well-being.
Good, I hope so as well. Because fear and guilt are not effective motivators for positive change. Thank you.
You are watching 101 Talks with Sachin Menon, where we break in big complex ideas into simple, grounded conversations. Thank you. See you in the next episode.